Hello, everybody watching. Welcome to another episode from Nubian, where we discuss everything Nubian. For too long, the Nubian narrative have been lost or overshadowed. But on this podcast, we are claiming that narrative, placing the Nubian perspective front and center. Whether your roots are in the Nile Valley or you are simply curious about the Nubian or fascinated about the region, Nubian aims to be your guide. We'll be reviving Nubian history, celebrating its enduring culture, and amplifying Nubian voices on a global scale. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the origins, upheavals, and the resilience of Nubians. I would like to welcome my guest for today's discussions, Elaf. How are you, Elaf? How have you been?
Hi, how are you? I'm good. How are you?
Could you please tell us shortly about yourself?
Yeah, of course. I'm Milaf. I'm 27 years old. I'm Sudanese, originally from Dongola, which is in North Sudan. Thank you for inviting me today for this episode. I'm quite excited to share my culture and to let people know more about how rich this Nubian culture is.
Thank you, Ila, for being our guest for today's episode too. So could you please tell us more about the Nubian history and when did the first Nubians settle in your region?
Yeah, of course. So originally the Nubian have always resided in the Nile Valley, 3,600 before century. But the northern and the southern borders varies through time because they of course migrated and moved a lot. But because of this displacement, it also affected their history.
And what struggle did they face during their settlement?
You mean through the displacement they faced?
Yes.
Yeah, of course. So mainly when they started the displacement due to the construction of the Aswan Low and High Dam in 1902, 1912, 1932. So of course this displacement affected their lifestyle, their economy, how they live. They lost a lot of stuff due to that. So it wasn't easy, of course.
I'm sure one of the things they have lost during their settlement, their displacement is losing their cultural identity because it's connected to the Nile and struggling economically.
You mean how did that affected their origin and how they are connected to the Nile?
Yes, and what did the challenge they have faced?
Okay, so the challenges, of course, let's start with losing the culture and the identities that's tied to the Nile, and then the economic structure. It wasn't really fair for them to lose everything and move. Finding jobs and new lands to start their businesses wasn't easy. The psychological strain, of course, of leaving everything and displacement and continuously moving. And when you move from a place to a new environment, your body have to adapt, and that also comes with a lot of health concerns in the new environments. So yeah.
So the Nubians are known about resilience, and I believe they can adapt to socioeconomics and changes and activities. So, what are some of the activities that they carried out, are specific to a certain regions in relation to their neighbors, the Romans or the Egyptians? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, of course. So this definitely differed by the resources they got on their hand. So let's say for the North, for example, they got fertile land. It made them masters in agriculture. They had really wide variety of crops, comparing to their neighbors. And for the South, they had cattle ranching. It thrived due to the environment there. They had also lots of minerals, gold and copper. So I think each region had a specific set of skills and resources that they worked with.
So, what are the similarities there among Nubians, from different regions, like North Sudan or South Egypt or Jibal al-Nuba, and their differences?
So Nubians, through spread across regions, shared a common thread. It's Nile fostered the similarities, agriculture practice, the beliefs, the settlement pattern. They shared lots of ancestry, and the language, of course, it didn't change a lot, the social structure and how strong leadership they carried along. So it's the same also. Each region had different set of, I wouldn't say similarities, but more of skills and how they live through when they move impacts. So for the Northern, we talked about the agriculture and their trading, and because they were open to a couple of other places and cultures. The South, they were really famous with cattle ranching and the minerals they had and how they used it in trading. And in Jibal and Nuba, their farming method were a bit unique because also their practices are a bit different because of the isolation. They weren't really connected to the other Nubians.
So they have adopted and integrated other culture with an elements and within them. So what did the Nubian borrow from other neighbors?
Let's take Egypt for an example. They adapted, let's say, writing and the art. For the southern part, they adapted the metalworking and the artistic motifs from the sub-Saharan Africa. So I think each Nubian area adapted what was nearest to it and what they were exposed to it by their neighbors.
So they wasn't isolated, like, but they integrated like selectively,
Not
something
at all.
selective.
Not at all. Of
No?
course.
Like, and how did the language evolve during all of this?
So, of course, the language evolves like any other language with how people carry it, how people perceive it, how people save it in generation, and how they carry it along generations. So, the Nubian language evolved as they settled and encountered new culture and dialects, let's say the intersections and how they merged with local population and their neighbors. So, the new words were borrowed, the new concept. Of course, the religion affected it, let's say for their neighbors, the Egyptian, they had Islam and Christianity, so that of course kind of affected it. And the writing system, how they also perceived this, how they influenced their systems. So the thing is, unfortunately, we don't really have clear document for this because it's quite limited. But yeah, those are the main factors that shaped the Nubian language over time.
Are there aspects of the Nubian culture that we feel are unlikable or like outdated?
So, to be honest, the Nubian culture is quite rich tapestry, like that was woven over millennia. It for sure adapted to the different influences over time, but it kept the core identity. Like they kept holding to their identity. It really didn't change a lot. So they had the religious ritual, the traditional dispute resolution method, their marriage tradition. Of course, there was like new woman empowerment move, and they had more education opportunities now. It wasn't really open back in the days to them, and the cultural exchange with their neighbors and the opportunity to do that. So I think it kind of evolved to the better.
What aspect of Nubian culture do we seek to preserve?
So as Nubians, I would say we strive to preserve the culture in lots of different methods, I would say, like art, music, and murals. So I think each different people or each different tribe have their own way to perceive their culture and their identity. So it really depends on what's more important to them.
And like, what are the preservation forms they have done?
So the preservation is not just documents to pass, but also to ensure the cultural to continue and evolve through the generation. I would say the main elements were, let's say, for the art, they drew on their homes are very colorful. They always drew murals, and it was really, colorful. And even if someone new visited, they would not really forget this culture and this colorful things they saw behind. And the language, the social practice, the stories. In their marriages, they had like lots of songs and music that I wouldn't say the language, even if the language changed, the music wouldn't really change a lot. So that will be passed during to the next generation. And then, yeah, I think that's mostly it.
And what the role of the literature and art and music in preserving?
Storytelling, of course, like that's the main point. Storytelling, passing knowledge, history, and cultural like values to preserve those. So they save the identity, provide a sense of like, let's say, educational for the others and also the next generation. And I think art can be very adaptable to the place or to the people. It changes with time and it adapts. So it's not really hard to carry with you to the next generation for the people to carry along.
So like
It's a very good method to preserve the culture.
yeah, so like from I get from you, like the Nubians like have literally effectively preserve their rich cultural heritage for future generations. So like what like are you
Yeah.
able so like are you able to identify any Nubian sources in today's modern world?
Yeah, of course. I think we have Muhammad Wardi and Muhammad Munir. Those are singers, like very famous singers. And then we have Maram Ahmed. She's an interesting, talented fashion designer. So they're really making an impact out there.
Like how do you as a Nubian plan to ensure the preservation of culture for future generations?
Like, I would really like that the culture and the language to be spread more that one day we will be able to kind of document the language and all the cultural things we have, because it's kind of fading away and not a lot of people are speaking the language right now. So it would be really like a very good project to have that documented. So in like 100, 200 years, people will have some sort of organized, detailed documentation of how this was carried. So yeah, I would love for the future generation to have that.
And actually, one of the ways to preserve the Nubian culture for future generation is this podcast, to have a way for a presentation. Thank you for joining us today, Elaf, on
Yeah,
Nubian's.
that's really nice.
Yeah, we are really
Thank you.
working.
Thank you so much for hosting me. I
Yeah,
really hope like people will enjoy this podcast. Thank you so much.
I really hope so too. So, thank you for joining us today, Elaf, all Nubians out there. If you enjoyed this episode, there is so much more to come. We have got some truly fascinating topics lined up in the coming weeks, exploring marriage in Egyptian versus Sudanese Nubia. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to receive notification for new episodes. Thanks again for joining us on Nubian. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.